Hi, everybody. Welcome to Finding Freedom Podcast. I am your host, pastor and life coach, Emily Metzger. We are taking a small break from our deconstruction series, and I am so very honored to have the very knowledgeable David Hayward, or most commonly known as NakedPastor, on today's podcast. So I want to personally just take a second and thank you again for being here. Honestly, I am just really honored and thrilled to have you. I honestly didn't know if I would be able to get you. You have so many followers.
I love talking with people. I thanks for having me on, Emily. Nice to meet you, and hello everybody out there. I basically live the life of a hermit at home, and I live in a pretty secluded place in Canada. And so I just love getting on talking with people. So it's really good to hang out.
Yeah, I hear that. I've always wanted to visit Canada. I hope I get to one day.
Well, you're not that far away.
Yeah, I'm hoping to make that happen.
Yeah.
So you've been very open, talking about your deconstruction journey and that you've been doing this for I don't even know how many years. I know I personally have been following you for like 3, so I know it's longer than that. But I know you've been very open about it for a very long time. And I read in one of your articles, it said that you had started your deconstruction journey in seminary. Is that right? Okay. And then it kind of just culminated, it said in the article, in about 2009. So could you give a short synopsis of what led you to start your deconstruction and what your mental and emotional state was like prior to your deconstruction?
Confident. I was confident and certain and, all those good things. But I was in seminary, Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary near Boston. And, I was deep into the Bible. I got my Master's of Theological Studies majoring in New Testament. I studied under the Honorable Dr. Gordon Fee and David Scholler and all the big names in biblical studies. I got, I don't know how many years of biblical Greek. I got 3 years of Hebrew. I got a year of Aramaic, theological French, theological German. I was totally immersed in the Bible. And because, ever since I was a young person and a teenager, I just fell in love with the Bible. I still have my interlinear New Testament with all underlined in different colors and writing in the margin. And so that's what, I was passionate about. And my intention was to go on from there and take my PhD in New Testament, which I started at the University of Toronto, and become a New Testament scholar. That was my goal. But I got sidetracked for many different reasons, including Lisa getting pregnant, and ended up in the ministry instead. But what happened, it was the day of my graduation from seminary when I'd been reading a book. I was done my studies and everything. All my papers were in and all the exam taken and all this. And I was ready to graduate. I already knew I was graduating cum laude and everything. And I was reading this book, The Silence of Jesus by James Breach. And it rocked my world. Like, I realized I wasn't sure the Bible was all the 3 I's: inspired, infallible, and inerrant. So all those things came under question for me. It wasn't like, oh, the Bible is not inspired. It just planted a question, a doubt.
Yes.
And that was the beginning of my deconstruction right there. I can pinpoint the day. And because, when you base all of your spiritual and religious and Christian life and beliefs on one thing, if that one thing gets questioned, then everything
it blows everything up.
That's right.
It does. So it blows everything
that began
up.
my deconstruction journey that, went for over 30 years. So that, so before then I was totally reveling in New Testament studies and just full of youthful bravado, and ready to take on the world and take on the church and reform the church and blah, 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 blah. When that happened, and then, I became much more over time, humble, I think, and respectful of questions and doubt and so on. And so that became a huge part of my spiritual journey after that.
Let me just share something with you. I think you'll find this quite comical. I didn't write this down, so this is totally improv. I know the minute that I started deconstructing too. I was in the middle of a live sermon, and I said what I had wrote down, and without thinking, I said, "But I don't believe that."
You said that out loud?
Out loud, on the live, in the middle of a sermon. And that was it. I was like, you know what? I can't even finish this with a straight face. I can't even finish this sermon. I gotta go. And I literally did not do another sermon for like, I think it was 6 or 8 months, until I started to really know what I believed, because it was like that 1 second, it was like, oh no, I can't sit here and teach something I don't even believe. Like, I just can't.
I admire you for that, because I know a lot of pastors who, and I totally understand it. I totally get it, because everything's at stake. I know that everything's at stake: your career, your income, your family's security, everything. And and I know a lot of pastors who are thinking that in their heads. I don't really believe this, but so they're pretending, or they feel like they're lying, or they are what's that the syndrome where imposter syndrome.
Yes, that too.
And really struggle with that. But for you to go and say it out loud,
it just came out like with no thought. I was like, okay.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Because I had already, started studying and, realizing that certain things I just didn't agree with, or, realizing that it was okay all those years to not agree with certain things. So it was just like, that just slipped out without even a thought process.
Would you be able to answer what that belief was?
I honestly don't remember what it was now.
Okay.
I just remember that I said I don't believe it.
That's funny.
And I went on a sabbatical for like 6 months, because I was like, I'm not preaching something I don't believe in. That seems really wrong.
Wow, that's a great story. In hindsight.
Yeah. In the beginning of the deconstruction, it was like I said, it just kind of, everything blew up. You know what I mean? All my beliefs were just scattered. I lost so many friends and family, during my deconstruction, because they all were like, either A, you're going crazy, or B, you just were never a Christian. You hear all the rhetoric when you start to deconstruct, and people don't understand, and it's just like. But now, I tell you what, now that I'm pretty much past the harder parts of the deconstruction, I'm so glad those people left me alone. I have so much peace. I can't even lie.
It's true. No, it's true. I get it. Yeah.
So what was your self-identity like prior to your deconstruction, and then like through the beginning hard stages? What was your self-identity like?
Well, like I said, I was pretty confident. I did well in my New Testament studies, my biblical studies. I was, encouraged by my professors and everything. So, I was deep into this, intending to become a full-time member of the Society of Biblical Literature, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I was totally on my way to becoming a part of the biblical studies world. And I wanted to become a very vocal, outstanding New Testament scholar. And I had no intentions of going into the ministry. Like, that to me was not on my radar at all. And so I was very much into the books. and very much into like research and being alone in the library or whatever, and just studying and studying and studying. And so when I started my degree, my PhD at Toronto University, I knew I was facing hardships because it was probably going to take me 7 years. I knew I was facing debt because it's very expensive. And but I was determined. I was still very young. I was like 23 or 4 years old, and I started my PhD. So I was on my way and feeling pretty excited about that whole venture.
Yeah.
But then I realized, when Lisa and she got pregnant, we'd been trying for 7 years unsuccessfly, and bingo, it happened, and we realized we were facing a financial crisis, and I wouldn't have been very much of a father, I don't think, being in the thick of PhD studies. I know it can be done, but I wasn't relishing the thought of my head being buried in the books with a young family, and also I didn't like student debt, and I was offered the opportunity to go into ministry in the Presbyterian Church in Canada, which I was a part of at that time.
Gotcha.
And it was like a deal and it was an offer I couldn't turn down. It was just perfect. They were offering me a place to live. They were offering me a job with income, and I would be preaching, and I could preach from the Bible, of course, and etc. I could continue my New Testament studies, etc. I could do all that thing, but being a pastor at the same time. And so, I was thinking of people like teaching pastors, like Karl Barth, that kind of, he did it for a while. I thought, well, maybe I can do it too, and so that was, I struggled all the way through the ministry. The whole time I was a pastor, I struggled with being a pastor. I struggled with my ordination. I remember the night before my ordination, being ordained with 2 other guys who were friends, and in the Presbyterian Church in Canada. And I was like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, because they all felt called.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel that call. And I would really, really struggled with it. And they were like, just shut up and get ordained already. Like, it's just like, just do it. So I bit the bullet and I did it. And then I was in the ministry for like 30 years, pastoring churches. So,
wow.
yeah.
So in your deconstruction journey, did you ever go through what a lot of deconstructionists go through with that sense of who am I? Like after the religious trauma of being told how awful you are all throughout, Christianity and the main, especially with the evangelical circles. Did you ever struggle with that?
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, yeah, I'll tell you, I had, so I ended up in the Presbyterian Church. I was a student pastor for a while, got ordained, had and I was in a large Presbyterian church working as an assistant when, and I was still, deep into the books and still, translating Greek in the New Testament, and still doing all that stuff, and very regimented and researching very much in my head. And I had a very profound kind of a cataclysmic experience, a spiritual experience. It was devastating though. And where I realized I sucked as a human being. That all this theological study and all the New Testament and Old Testament and original languages and all my efforts, and I felt like I was sucked as a human being because I treated somebody very poorly, a street person, and
Gotcha.
and I just realized, like I realized I just wasn't a very nice person, and it devastated me to the
Yeah.
point where fortunately, and in Canada, well, you'd know about this in Michigan, we had a huge snowstorm that weekend, fortunately. And so we were housebound, like we could not go anywhere. Church was canceled, like it was, so I had a whole weekend to mull over what had happened on Friday. And I ended up talking with a friend on the phone. I found an old book somebody gave me as a gift that I kind of threw into a box and never thought anything of it. And I dug up that book, but it was written by Henry Nouwen, called Reaching Out. So he is a Roman Catholic spiritual teacher.
Okay.
And I read that book, and it was exactly what I needed at that time. And so that started me down a road of looking for a spiritual director. I was looking for a spiritual director, and that led me to Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, and so on and so forth. So I began this sort of inner spiritual journey while being a Presbyterian. And so I was into the mystics, and I was into, and my spiritual director was a Roman Catholic nun. I had to sneak to go and visit her, and because if anybody saw me going to the monastery to visit the Roman Catholic nun, I would have been in deep trouble. So it was like I kept it all under, in secret, and I was reading Merton, and that led me to Zen, and then to Buddhism, and then to Krishnamurti, and then to it just led me down this whole path while I was in the church, and it opened up. It was like I found a way. It provided a way for me to figure out how to be spiritual.
Yeah.
Independently and
Yeah.
unique, authentically me. Right.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. So I don't know how to turn their phone off. I hope it doesn't ring again. Okay. So was there a time like in like your middle ground, right? Somewhere in the middle ground of your deconstruction and your spiritual awakening journey that your self-identity started to become more apparent to where you actually felt comfortable in your skin? And no matter what that meant.
Well, so one of the things I've come to conclude is that deconstruction isn't just a phase. For me, deconstruction is another word for spiritual growth. And
yes,
and
I
never,
so agree with you.
Therefore, it never ends.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's a part of my life now, deconstructing, because for me, we're constantly being fed what to believe, how to behave. And we always have to question everything. Like even, when you're reading stuff online or you're watching the news or whatever, you have to filter everything. You have to make sure like, you just don't swallow everything hook, line, and sinker. Like you need to think independently and be your most authentic self. And so, and ever since I was a little child, I knew there was always a choice to be made. Most people know this instinctively. Know this, that we want to be ourselves, but we want to be loved, and we realize pretty early that okay, you have to make a decision which one you want, because you can have both.
That's true.
And so that's always been my struggle, is how to be my most authentic self while being accepted and loved by other people. And so I decided some time ago, and it was around when I left the ministry in 2010, that I'm going to love myself and be my most authentic self. And who loves me will love me, and who doesn't won't. And that was a tough decision to make, but I made it, even though it was later in life.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 40. I didn't make that decision until 2 years ago. And it's like, I wish I had just learned that lesson way earlier, But I think that's how it is. You don't learn these really big, important things until you're older and you've been through crap,
And maybe, it's like they say, the teacher only appears when the student's ready.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't ever think, oh man, I wish I knew this earlier or whatever, because it's like I always say, I wouldn't be who I am now unless I was who I was then. And so it's
That's
all
true
a part of
too.
my story. Everything gets folded in.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the analogy I use of compost. It's half manure and half soil, it's like it's a mixture of good and bad.
Yeah.
And that's the culture out of which I grow. And so I
Mm-hmm.
I look back and appreciate everything I've gone through, everything I've done, believed, everything, and somehow figure out a way to integrate all that into who I am, because that is who I am. I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't go back in your story and rip out a whole chapter, because then you wouldn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be who you are now unless you were who you were then
That's
either.
true. That's very true. And we all evolve, so who we are changes repeatedly through life.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
one thing, because I'm also a certified life coach and I specialize in deconstructing and religious trauma. And so, one of the things that I tell people that come to me for the deconstruction part of it is I tell them this is not, a one time thing. This is a lifelong journey. This is something that you're going to be on forever, because once you start asking the questions, they don't stop.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
Once you free
Yeah.
yourself to ask those questions, they just keep coming, and each
Yeah.
answer you get and each answer you get spurs another question, and so it just keeps going. So it's one thing I tell everybody that comes to me is be prepared, because this isn't just something you're going to do for a week or a month or a year and be done. It does
Yeah, that's
not
what I
work
say
that way.
too.
It doesn't
I
work that
wrote a
way.
book I wrote a book a few years ago called Questions Are the Answer. And that I stand by that questions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always an important part of our lives until the day I die. I want to keep growing
Yes.
till the day I die, and so
Yes.
this is what deconstruction is, and not to be afraid of the question, not to be afraid of mystery or
Yeah.
darkness or doubt. You know, I just recently read Isaacson's biography of Einstein, and
Mm-hmm.
Einstein just it was deeply embedded in him that there was a unifying theory of everything.
Mm.
And the theory of relativity worked for a while, but then quantum physics came along and blew everything up. And so he had this whole idea that there was a unifying theory, but the quantum mechanics felt that
Mm-hmm.
everything was chaos. But he couldn't believe it. He just couldn't believe that everything was chaos. There has to be some kind of order somewhere, some unifying theory of everything. And until his dying day, he was searching for that unifying theory. And that's the way I feel about the truth. Is
Mm.
I never think I'm going to know the truth, but I enjoy seeking it
Yeah.
and become a part of my life, and to enjoy it. It's like you say, wear a seatbelt, and wear a helmet,
Yeah.
but enjoy it. Enjoy the ride.
Right. So, what tips, advice, wisdom do you have for people considering deconstruction, but also those that are like in the beginning and the middle parts of the deconstruction? Do you have any tips, wisdom, advice?
I don't think you can consider deconstruction. I think deconstruction happens to you. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to
Truth.
deconstruct. Nobody says, "Hey, I want to enter into the dark night of the soul." I want to walk through the valley of darkness and evil. No, nobody says that. Nobody wants it. I think
Yeah.
it just happens to you. It surprises you, where you suddenly question everything, and it's very, very traumatic. It is traumatic, but it's kind of like my wife Lisa. She tells a story like when she was a teenager. She would experience real pain in her legs from growing pains in her legs, and her mom would come and roll her legs for her, like kind of massage and roll
Mm-hmm.
her legs, and that helped. And
Yeah.
that's just part of growing up, and it's the same spiritually. It hurts, but it's growth. That's what growth is. And
Yeah.
so if you can, you can't prepare, it's going to surprise you, it's going to be traumatic, but then you realize you're kind of going from you're kind of in a compression chamber where you're changing atmospheres.
Mhm.
And it takes a while to get used to it. But
Yes.
once you're used to it, it's actually beautiful and preferred.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Deconstruction saved my life, to be honest with you. I was so miserable before I deconstructed. You know,
Yeah.
not just with my relationship with God and how I saw Christianity, but just me as a whole. I was
Yeah.
unhappy in every area, but once I deconstructed, it was like healing balm just throughout every area of my life. And I've heard a lot of people say that they experienced the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It is because see, in my opinion, the church is great at helping us through our infant childhood stages. But when we get to the adolescent stage of spiritual growth or phase, where we start questioning things like an adolescent would, like, why should I
Mhm.
listen to you? Or
Yeah.
why
Hmm.
should I believe this? Or when they start questioning their parents, their teachers, the police, government, everything, like the church has a hard time handling that. And that's where
Mm.
it drops the ball, in my opinion, generally speaking.
Oh
And
no,
it's
I agree
figure
because
out a way. Yeah.
yeah, I agree
Yeah.
because I was always told, if you have questions beyond what we're preaching, then you're doubting. And
Yeah.
now that I've deconstructed, I'm like, no, questions are not doubt. It's seeking more.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not
exactly.
doubting.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of trauma that happens, when you're asking questions. It's like they're afraid of them. And it's like me as a pastor, I'm like, bring your questions because for one, if I don't have the answer, let's research it together and find it because I'm
Yeah.
not afraid of your questions and neither is God. And that's one thing that I tell people when I coach them. God is not some weak God. He is not scared of your questions. you
Right.
know that you were taught that, but that's not true. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So
Well, it's not just churches, right? It's even like it comes right down to parents or even
that too.
friends or marriages. The pressure is to stay within the limits that
Hmm.
everybody's comfortable with.
Yeah, they
And
want you in a box.
so no
Hmm.
parent wants their kid coming up to them and saying, why should I believe you? Like, why should
Yeah.
I obey you? And
Mm.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I wanna do something else than what your plans for my life are. Like no parent's comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And so but it's the same in the church. It's just really, it's easier to control and manage people when there's a strict set of steps that people are required to follow.
Yeah.
But if you deviate from that, then it gets chaotic and nobody likes chaos.
you know. So one last question.
Sure.
What can you say to people that are deconstructing, right? And they're
Mhm.
still trying to find out who they are. Like if they've went through the whole religious trauma or if they just people pleased their whole lives and didn't know who they were and this is a whole new thing to them.
Yeah.
What can you say?
So the thing is, you already are who you are. And so I often say to people, look, when all this is done and all the dust is settled and everything, and you've achieved some kind of spiritual um, uh, state that you're happy with, basically it's Ram Dass's book title, Be Here Now. And you're like, I'm I'm here, I'm here now. Be here
Mm-hmm.
now. You'll
Mm-hmm.
realize that you've always been there now. The problem is you've fought it, you've denied it, you've judged it, you didn't like it, were insecure or ashamed of it. And so people who are deconstructing, they come to me, they're in torment. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what? You're a beautiful person. Like you really are appealing. And you seem very wise to me. And you seem very compassionate and caring and humble and kind and funny and beautiful. Like, what more do you want? Like, so you're already there. You just need to accept that. And
Amen.
once you accept that you're who you are, that's when all the anxiety drops off and all the
Yes.
shame and everything. You realize you know what? They all told me I was broken, and I'm actually fine. I'm actually, yeah, I've got wounds. Things have happened to me I don't like, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm okay. I'm
Mhm.
okay. And when you get to that point when you say, I'm okay, you'll realize you've always been okay. So why not start
Yes.
today?
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. I have so appreciated you being on here. This really, really touched me that I was able to talk with you and get to know you a little bit. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Emily. Pastor Emily,
Yeah.
nice to meet you and hang out.
Yeah. So thank you guys for listening to this episode of the podcast. I'll catch y'all next week. Love y'all.